And so I go my whole life trying to prove to this 5-year-old self that I'm good enough, and what if I just make enough money? That's what was motivated me at first. If I make enough money, won't people see me as successful? But the problem is, that's a gaping hole that no matter how much money you stuff in it, is never filled. I'm writing a book right now and nearly complete with it called Win Then Play. Win, then play. And it really is broken down into 4 main segments. The first segment comes down to perspective, philosophy, and mindset. And so I'm going to dial that in just a little bit. The second perspective is money. But in the money segment, win then play means making money on the buy. It means creating more cash flow. It means having economic independence so that you can swing for the fences in everything that you do, so that you've already set up the win before you've even began and really worked so hard for something that never comes about with most people when they're considering retirement. Then the third segment is scale. And I'm doing some really great case studies in this because there's a way that people can profit from their ideas up front, and we can abolish this notion of venture capital, which has been kind of a shark-infested water that gets people to give their entire life and dream to another company that squashes it if they're not the 1 in 10 that become profitable enough. And so people don't have to borrow to start a business. They don't have to borrow money in order to go out there and be productive. That's what I talk about in scale, is the cycle of creation, how we move from an idea to a more formalized concept to a framework that is supported by the very end users, meaning the customers, and they actually fund it so that you don't owe any money. You've created the momentum, and it becomes a product, service, or experience, and we keep going through that cycle. Look, I pre-sold 22,000 copies of Killing Sacred Cows before it was released. We did a financial program back in 2008, and we pre-sold $150,000 before we filmed the first video, which meant we were actually putting out videos for people that were going to watch them versus hoping that we were going to create something people wanted to watch. And it created this momentum and accountability, by the way. Created accountability because we told them, hey, this is a beta version. We want your feedback. We want you to be case studies, and we'll charge you half the price that when it's done. But they were also more forgiving when we had an error on a video or something didn't load or work right? And they became part of that feedback. And so this whole notion of scale isn't the traditional over-leverage, overwork, exit some business, grow bigger than anyone else that you know while you forfeit and sacrifice every aspect of your life. It's more about scale in that you really dial in the best of who you are, and you only do those activities while you actually learn how to properly delegate and build a vision that is the most rare commodity, like I talked about last year, that gets other people to come and support you. Because in the world of scale, it's not the same as goals and objectives. Goals and objectives we already know how to achieve. Scale and vision is something beyond your reach that you actually get other people to help you build because they feel inspired by it. Like when I said I want to liberate 1 million entrepreneurs to become economically independent, I know how the hell was I going to do that? I don't know. But by actually stating it, I started getting people that said, I want to be part of that. Like I was on a phone call with one of our clients yesterday, and they're like, hey, we want to not only be one of the million, we want to bring other people with us. That's how that happens, because you're brave enough to say something you don't have the capability for, but you have the integrity and commitment to bring it about. And then the fourth segment of the book is legacy. And I look at legacy as living your legacy and the legacy that you leave, that there's 2 aspects to that. And first and foremost, when it comes to legacy, most people don't even consider that conversation, because when people are in survival, they become selfish. And in survival mode and scarcity, they're not considering legacy, they're just considering how do they make it from day to day. They're not considering how to build a life they love. They're just trying to make ends meet. And ultimately, this is where most of the population is. And I talked to these 2 people, Mike and Tori, yesterday, that, by the way, this was a fascinating story, because they were wherever Hurricane Irene hit really hard. They lived there, and 10 years ago, it devastated them. They almost went bankrupt. They weren't able to help anyone out but themselves. They were so ill-prepared. And then they met us a couple years ago. They got their protection component handled, right? They started to make sure they understood what type of insurances they have, what the provisions were inside of the insurances. They actually dug a well on their property. They started to go out and, Utah's big on this. They got some food storage. If you haven't done the food storage thing, then by the time you leave here, they're probably going to teach you to have some food storage in case there's a snowstorm or something. But this hurricane, last year when the hurricane happened, it was 9 months ago, they had to close their practice for 45 days because no one could even drive to get there. But during that time, they wrote a book. They launched a rejuvenated medicine clinic that they started doing online education for. They built the website. And by the way, last month they had $112,000 from that new business in rejuvenation of medical rejuvenation, because it became about education and leverage, because this was more about, like, they weren't just in survival thinking about themselves. They have people living at their house right now that their home was 10 feet under, and now they're taking care of other people because they're more abundant. They didn't just think about this notion of like retirement. Like, retirement is such a terrible notion, because first and foremost, it is a selfish goal. Retirement is completely selfish, and it has very little to do with prosperity, because you're putting some target out in there in the future that you say, once I hit this, I'm going to start bankrupting my family. I'm just going to start taking for me, and I'm no longer going to be in the world of value creation. And as we look at the convergence of purpose and profit, retirement is not in that convergence, because retirement is retiring from purpose for most people. I just talked to this guy, Brad Bokey, yesterday. I'm in the middle of case studies for the book, so I have all these like very fresh stories in my head, just so you know. But I was talking to Brad, and Brad's a dentist that when I first met him, he was in this like little house of a dentist office. Like, it looked pretty, I wouldn't go there, all right? Maybe I'm a snob. But I was like, that place kind of sucks. Now, last time I went and saw him, he has this place called Bayside Dental. I thought I was like in a lobby of a Vegas hotel. It was phenomenal. And once he had a patient that said to him, well, doc, you must be charging me a lot in order to be able to afford this. He goes, you're using a PPO, idiot. Like, you're going to pay the exact same amount so we can go back to that crappy house, or we can have this amazing lot. And he goes, I really like this place, right? But see, a lot of people have that kind of scarcity thinking. But Brad told me, he goes, I don't see retiring. I could see myself still doing dentistry at 80 years old. But he had to give up a lot of the things that was busy and the scarcity type things where he was scrimping and saving, and it was holding him back in order to feel that abundant. And so for him, it became about, how do I build a life that I love? And so he just bought a boat, and he bought the $60,000 boat, and it's on Dock CC in Dallas, and he's loving it. He can't wait to go and experience life. Now, is that a good financial purchase? I don't really care. What I care about is he loves his life. And what good is our money if we're not able to utilize it and benefit our life? I think that's a critical piece. So as I break this down, I'm going to spend a lot of time in the legacy component, and I'm going to just spend a little bit of time in the mindset component, and I might, filter in a few things on the scale side and the money side. But in the mindset, there's really three kind of mindsets. And one is the same, it's like the other side of a coin. The first side of the scarcity coin is playing not to lose. Most of the population is stuck in playing not to lose. Fear, doubt, and worry are their mantra. They're thinking about what they can do to preserve and protect without being intelligent about it. It's really the book, The Millionaire Next Door. And what I've learned from that book is if you want to be a miserable millionaire, you can completely do it and everybody hates you, right? And by the way, when you die, your heirs will just blow the money in 16 months because they didn't even know that you had it. So playing not to lose is all about scrimping and sacrificing and delaying and deferring and getting blisters on your fingers from pinching those pennies. And it's Ebenezer Scrooge at the ultimate version of it, right? And there's this different moral to that story. But playing not to lose, I don't feel like it's the people in this room that are stuck in playing not to lose. Playing not to lose, you wouldn't invest in a conference. You wouldn't attend something to increase your education because you would look at that as an expense rather than an investment. But where I feel most entrepreneurs get stuck is in the other side of that coin, called playing to win. Like, I just spoke at MIT Endicott House at a thing called the Gathering of the Titans, and they asked 5 newbies, what are the last words you would speak on your deathbed? And the 5th guy said, I just tell people, play to win. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna rock this dude's world. Because play to win, I'm just gonna dismantle the hell out of it. And that's apparently was gonna be his last word. See, play to win is societal success. Play to win is where we look at the magazine and we see Elon Musk on the magazine, but then we read a different article that says he's sleeping only 2 hours a day. By the way, news is out. That's terrible for your health, right? He's so stressed out. He's got to, just smoke some weed to get a little bit of relaxation and just a temporary break. And then, he's got this wife that's now writing that's an ex-wife, and then we hear about the story where he slept on a couch, where he was dead broke, but he made it. And we put these people on our shoulders like they're heroes. But most of them are actually a-holes because they have no life. They don't have true wealth. They may have a lot of money, but does that money translate to a quality of life for them? Are they living a life that they love? And even though they might be doing iconic things in the economy, are they creating a life that we should actually envy or model? Because what we don't see is the million stories of the people that failed following this model of playing to win. So I have some questions for you to consider in your own life. If you're in the playing to win phase, number one, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is the juice worth the squeeze? Number 2, play to win at what cost? What is the cost in order to achieve that, right? And ultimately, play to win, like that's where you see people stuck in the venture capital model. Or you see people stuck, where they're just, like I was this in my 20s. I remember my dad who's a coal miner, and when you think about coal miners work pretty damn hard. I remember telling them, I'm like, Dad, I'm gonna work harder than anyone else I know so that one day I can live a life that no one else can live. And what he told me, he goes, hey, I appreciate the work ethic and sentiment. He said, but the bottom line is you can never get back the experiences that you never have. You can never recall the memories that you never create. And so this is the damaging notion of play to win, is it becomes this one day, someday, where sacrifice is the mantra. In the world of religion, sacrifice means to make sacred. In any other context, sacrifice means to give up something. And a lot of times we're giving up something greater for something lesser. Hence the 401k. I mean, hell, that thing is, let's just put money in there, and then I guess 30 years from now, there's going to be money in there that the government just invades, and you're going to find out it wasn't what it was cracked up to be. It'll be riddled with fees, it'll underperform, and ultimately, people have taken their hard-earned money and components of their life and gifted it to that rather than having the experience along the way. See, I believe that we are our greatest assets, not a stock, not a bond, not a piece of real estate. And the real investment is the investment in ourselves, in understanding and exposing our skill sets and developing those skills and understanding the biggest vision that we're capable of. And so the best way I could say this in the convergence of purpose and profit is that the most of the population that is playing not to lose or playing to win, their entire purpose is profit. And it's a never-ending game because no matter how much money you make, someone else will always make more. No matter how much money you have, I kind of look at it like most entrepreneurs are just like broken kids that are still out here doing something to prove themselves. Like when I was in kindergarten and I didn't do what the teacher told me to do, which was memorize my home address, which was just 236 Carson, not hard to memorize. And that was the way I was going to get this art project back. And because I didn't memorize it, she threw it away. I was like, oh, shit, I'm stupid. How could I not get that, right? And so I go my whole life trying to prove to this 5-year-old self that I'm good enough. And what if I just make enough money? That's what was motivated me at first. If I make enough money, won't people see me as successful? But the problem is that's a gaping hole that no matter how much money you stuff in it is never filled. And this is the playing not to lose and the playing to win trap. This is where most people get stuck, is they're just trying to get more. And there's a disease to more, because as you add more, you'll find out, like I was in a room once at a mastermind, and someone sold their business for $80 million, and they were super depressed because as soon as they sold it, someone told them a story about a friend that had sold the business for $1 billion, and they immediately felt broke. I have a friend here in Salt Lake, his name's Jeff. Jeff had a private plane, and he landed at the Salt Lake airport, and then he looked over, and who's the big billionaire here in Utah? Huntsman. Huntsman's plane was next to him. Huntsman had a badass big plane. Jeff had a pretty cool plane, but smaller, so he went from feeling amazing on the flight to looking at the other plane being like, I'm a complete failure. This is playing to win. This is what playing to win is like, and playing to win is a liar and a thief. It lies to us by saying, I'm just going to do this for now, but it'll be different in the future. So we tell our family, we tell our friends, not now, but later. But guess what? We just continue to have more opportunity. We continue to have more things pile onto the plate. We continue to try to earn more money. And then we eventually get there checking off all the boxes. And guess what people feel like when they've checked off the boxes? They still feel like the wounded child that's not loved enough, that didn't accomplish enough, that someone did better than them. And it's a complete destructive trap.